Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Think of this as an executive briefing where we're going to unpack a really critical intersection: public health, cultural heritage, and risk management. We are tackling a fascinating and honestly pretty complex issue today, which is the consumption of shark meat during pregnancy. So here's our roadmap for the briefing. We'll start with the executive summary, dive into deep-rooted cultural traditions, look at the scientific complication, assess fetal mercury risks, go over strategic safer alternatives, and finally wrap up with balancing culture and health. Section 1. The executive summary, basically our bottom line up front. The core public health challenge we're facing here is this: how do we navigate deeply held cultural traditions in coastal regions, places like Sri Lanka and India, for example, while at the same time mitigating some severe toxicological risks to fetal development? This isn't just about handing out a dietary dictate, it's really about understanding historical practices and figuring out how to adapt them safely for our modern reality. Right at the absolute center of this dialogue is the expecting mother. And what's crucial to remember here is that whether you're looking through the lens of ancestral tradition or modern scientific warnings, the underlying goal is exactly the same: protect the mother and make sure she has a strong, healthy baby. The intent is totally aligned, even if the methods are kind of clashing right now. Moving on to Section 2, deep-rooted cultural traditions in coastal and island communities. So many coastal communities rely on long-term observations that suggest shark meat provides strength, bravery, and protection from disease. It's literally a cornerstone of maternal care. In parts of Sri Lanka and India, dried shark meat has traditionally been given to pregnant and breastfeeding women because it's widely believed to promote postpartum recovery and actively support breast milk production. And look, we absolutely have to acknowledge that these practices didn't just appear out of thin air, right? They arise from generations upon generations of careful cultural observation. Which brings us to Section 3, the scientific complication: evaluating the evidence. When we place those cultural benefits side by side with modern science, we hit a stark reality. Right now, there's no clinical evidence that shark meat uniquely creates stronger babies or specifically increases lactation. But hey, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Those historical benefits mothers experienced, they very likely stemmed from the incredibly high protein density of the meat, rather than some magical property of the shark itself. But here is the real kicker: our environmental baseline has completely shifted. Ancient communities were eating smaller sharks from pristine, untouched oceans. Today's oceans, they carry heavy contaminant loads, which fundamentally alters that old risk-benefit equation. Let's look at Section 4. Assessing fetal mercury risks, or what we call the apex predator problem. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding that sharks are apex predators. Because they sit at the very top of the food chain, they accumulate insanely high levels of mercury from all the smaller fish they eat over their long lifespans. This heavy metal is a potent neurotoxin. It can actually cross the placental barrier and directly threaten fetal development. To put that into perspective, large sharks can contain mercury levels up to 10,000 times higher than the surrounding water. 10,000 times. And exposure to this heavy metal during pregnancy is quantifiably linked to lifelong cognitive complications for the child. We are talking about measurable reductions in IQ, severe learning difficulties, and attention problems later in childhood. It's a tragic irony, really. A food that was traditionally consumed to improve a baby's alertness and intelligence is now scientifically proven to do the exact opposite, all because of modern oceanic pollution. Section 5. Strategic Safer Alternatives. A proactive mitigation plan. So what do? Well, health authorities strongly advise shifting to safer, lower mercury proteins. Expecting mothers can still get all those incredible nutritional benefits, the proteins and the omega-3s that support postpartum recovery and milk production, but without the toxic load. By simply choosing fish lower on the food chain or leaning into other culturally appropriate staples like eggs, beans, and lean meats, we can secure a healthy pregnancy and completely bypass that apex predator problem. Finally, Section 6, Balancing Culture and Health. Actionable steps forward. Our strategy here is a 3-step community-based approach. Talk, learn, choose. First, mothers should talk with local health workers to get tailored advice that actually respects their background. Second, learn about safer alternatives that still fit their specific cultural needs and flavor profiles. And third, actively choose those lower mercury options to protect the next generation. It's all about adaptation, not erasure. This quote perfectly illustrates the core objective of our briefing today. We absolutely must validate the cultural identity of these mothers. Their ancestors weren't wrong to seek out protein-dense foods for maternal health. But as public health advocates and just informed citizens, we have to firmly guide them away from modern environmental toxins, based on the realities of today's oceans. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. How can healthcare leaders bridge the gap between respecting ancient, long-term observational wisdom and actively protecting our future from modern oceanic pollutants? It's going to require empathy, clear communication, and a really deep respect for both the past and the future. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a clear, structured understanding of this super vital topic.